The other day, I was talking with a longtime friend who told me she really wants to start running again. She used to run all the time, but then life and kids and things happened. But lately, because it's summertime, it's just been too hot to run. But she knows she could wake up earlier in the day when it's not as hot, but she doesn't want to wake up any earlier than she does because she really values her sleep. And furthermore, she's apprehensive to start running because she knows her fitness level is nowhere near what it once was. The perfect conditions don't exist. So, is that a good reason to just not do anything? Or is waking up 10 minutes earlier to go for a 10-minute jog better than doing nothing? Welcome back to the Fitness of Business. I'm your host, Leslie Boyce. And I seem to meet a lot of people in my entrepreneurial circles who call themselves a recovering perfectionist. Not me. I am still full on perfectionist. And my daughter, who's 4, also a full on perfectionist, which is pretty fascinating to witness. But it seems like there's a shared trait among so many business owners because we hold ourselves to a really high standard. And that is often what also makes someone successful. But in what ways could needing everything to be perfect actually be holding you, okay, us, back in our businesses? My guest today is Sam Field, owner and founder of Field Therapy. Sam is a therapist, consultant, writer, and community builder whose work is rooted in connection, nourishment, and collective care. As a licensed professional counselor and certified addiction counselor, Sam is trained in EMDR, IFS, and somatic trauma therapy. She holds an MA in wilderness therapy and integrates creative approaches such as equine therapy, mindfulness, horticulture practices, and experiential work into her practice. Sam's career has taken her around the world, studying and advocating for accessible, inclusive healthcare. As a queer Jewish woman and mom, her own identities shape and inform her practice, adding depth and authenticity to her work. At the heart of Sam's work is a belief that therapy and community care are inseparable. Whether in the office, outdoors, or in an organizational space, she brings people together to practice the healing power of relationship with the vision of redesigning the world where everyone belongs. Sam and I met about 10 years ago when she became a member of my gym. And we hit it off immediately. And she eventually got her CrossFit certification and oversaw a program between my gym and a local middle school. So I can absolutely speak to Sam's passion for community building and have been continually impressed by her breadth of knowledge and commitment to inclusion in every aspect of her business and life. But before we chat with Sam, every episode starts with our Hey Coach segment. So, what would you ask if you had a business coach in your back pocket? Send your questions to Leslie at thefitnessofbusiness.com.
Hey, coach. I've been working on launching a new service in my med spa for months now. Every time I think I'm ready to launch, I find something else that isn't quite right. The website copy, the logo, even the way my pricing page looks. I keep telling myself I'll put it out there once it's perfect. That day never seems to come. How do I know when it's actually good enough to launch and stop holding myself back? And what if I launch before it's perfect and I get negative feedback? Please help.
Hi, Sam.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for
Hi.
having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. I have so many questions for you regarding this and probably lots of other things, but let's just start with Amy, our listener question. How would you respond to her?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a common question among entrepreneurs and maybe women identified people in this world is also just something that comes to mind of like when will this thing be ready and will it ever be ready? And it makes me think of something that I heard on a different business podcast, this idea of just launch everything always. I don't there's an acronym for it, and maybe or it's this idea of like always be launching new things and because something is going to work
Yeah.
and also going in with this idea that some things are not going to work. And I feel both of these things. I think sometimes I launch things before maybe they're ready, or I launch things years and years and years later. And I
Mhm.
think that to the part of me that launches something maybe many years later, the thing that I always think is that I should have just done it in that
Yeah.
moment. Um, because I think it kind of comes back to this idea of like trusting yourself that the idea that you had was a really good one and there's a reason you're doing it and the way that you're going to deliver it. That's not the thing that folks are going to be holding on to. It's going to be whatever the intention and the why was
Yeah.
when you initially came up with the idea, and sometimes just going for it. And I totally also hear what if you get negative feedback. And I think
Mhm.
the thing that I've learned as a business owner, as a community person, as a writer is that there's always going to be negative feedback. So not
Mhm.
what if there's going to be, but just knowing it's coming. And
Yeah.
usually the negative feedback, if we can reframe it, can be really supportive. Or how do we talk ourselves through that's negative feedback and maybe it's true for this person who's giving it, but it actually has nothing to do with me.
So many things that I want to, um, follow up on. But let's just start with the last thing you said. So, in terms of negative feedback, I think you're right. Like, you're going to get negative feedback because likely your goal as a business owner is to reach a broad audience. And by doing so, you are not going to deliver the exact right thing that's perfect for every single person, every single member of that audience. So, what kind of things can you tell yourself to sort of prepare for that blow, I guess for lack of a better term, and to do that reframing of, this is something I actually talked about with Chelsea when it came to flexibility and stretching your business is if a person is engaging with you and they're suggesting something, that means they are invested in what you're doing. So that actually could be a way to maybe positively spin it. What do you think about that?
Definitely. And I think that even can be really nuanced because I think it depends on how they're engaging with you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it becomes like this level of like of interpreting it. So, like, you put something out and you get negative feedback from someone you've never ever engaged with before and you don't care or know who they are and will never engage with them again. I think that kind of is a category of that type of individual is probably doing this somewhere in multiple places. So, like, do
Right.
you wanna
Right.
integrate that? And then is the negative feedback coming from somebody you've done work with before or is somebody that really matches your client demographic, and or a demographic you're really hoping to reach? And so if
Mhm.
you're getting negative feedback from either people you've already worked with or people you're hoping to work with, in my opinion, that's always worth offering a follow-up conversation. And then I think approaching those conversations from a place of they are delivering this information to you kind of this sounds silly, but, I've heard this before, that feedback can be a gift,
Mhm.
and that the person that's, like,
That's very
giving
like therapy speak.
it is, well, I'm a
I know.
therapist mostly, so, um but it's this idea of that, like, the person who's giving you that negative feedback is taking the time and energy to contact you and tell
Yeah.
you this thing, and hopefully that can open the lines of communication of, "Okay, do you wanna accept this negative feedback as something you are willing to shift or change in your business or in this service or product
Yeah.
or not?" And then I think it really comes also down to this idea of and I when I was thinking about perfectionism, this idea of, like, really defining for yourself, like, what are you doing and why? And
Mm.
so,
Yeah.
is the negative feedback so unrelated to what you're trying to do?
Mhm.
Or is it actually supporting whatever your reason is for doing the thing? And so I
Yeah.
think to Amy's question of like, when will it be ready? I don't know that we ever truly know that. And
Right.
sometimes the only way we know is by launching the thing. Um,
Yeah.
and I have launched so many things that may or may not have been ready, and then I also am holding things that are 10 years from when I should have launched them, and I've had
Mhm.
multiple times over the past 10 years where I was like, "I should have done it then, I should have done it then. Okay, I'm waiting for this point," but it often doesn't the right time never happens. I think there's
Yeah.
better times, but I don't think there's right times.
So how would you, given what you just admitted, um, like it was some big confession, but what you just said about, you know, you are sitting on a few things. One, are you going to just now launch them because you feel like, "Okay, I've waited long enough and I'm going to launch," or has the, demand or the landscape changed so much in that time that you recognize there's actually maybe not a demand for this or an audience for it?
I would say all of that is true, depending on
Mm.
the project. I would say I recently had this experience that somebody launched something so similar to what I had been thinking
Mhm.
that it was it was annoying that I didn't do it.
Totally.
So,
Yeah.
and I think that comes in with, like, this, like, scarcity, competitive mentality of entrepreneurship and business, and I really do try to approach business of, like, we need more than one of a similar thing, not just one of the one thing,
Yeah.
um, and so like, eases my panic of, "I should have launched that thing and I didn't and somebody did." One of my projects, like, the landscape has changed so many times that I've, like, revamped the thing, and so I think
Mhm.
to Amy's point too, that whatever her idea is, it might be so time sensitive of, like, the time is right now to be kind of, like, reaffirmed also that
Yeah.
put it out now because things might change.
Right. And it's like why I have always felt like, I owned a CrossFit gym. Like, the year that I opened, I think I'm making this number up, but it was something like 12 other CrossFit gyms opened in Denver. I mean, it was like,
Right. Well,
talk
that's
about a
yeah.
saturated market. However, there were a lot of people wanting to do CrossFit. So it wasn't like, well, just because there are 12 others opening, I'm gonna, cancel my lease and not go forward with it. The demand is there. So when you see somebody else who has, launched the thing and you sort of kick yourself and say, "Ah, then I should have," it also reminds you that, well, there are people interested in the thing. So it's not necessarily too late.
And there's so many contributing factors too, especially in launching products and services of so many external factors
Yeah.
of what's happening. Like, what are people spending money on? Are people doing in person? Are people not doing in person? What's the season? So I think that can contribute to when is a good time, but not like
Hmm.
when is the right time.
Right. When is the perfect time? Because there isn't.
Hmm.
And it ultimately goes back to, why do you do what you do? What makes you feel good? What is something that you can stand behind and feel really proud of and, you know, produce with integrity?
Hmm.
Um,
And if it fails, well, what does that mean, first of all?
mhm.
Like, what does that mean? But also, what do you do with that? And
Yeah.
how like, historically, for me, it has been the range of, like, don't do anything ever again and just do something different. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and how to, like, not I think that's the work, especially around perfectionism of, like, how do you not internalize that to
Yes. And
the
spiral.
place that it impacts everything?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Um, something that we talked a lot about in my graduate program, which it was sort of like a new concept to me in terms of the acronym, was an MVP, a minimum viable product.
Mhm.
And now it's something that I really encourage my clients to do for all the reasons you just said. Is it's like, well, first of all, nothing's ever going to be perfect. So if you take something and you don't have to put quite as much effort into, just getting it out there to collect feedback and see it as data, not judgment.
Mhm.
Because likely you've already done, a sufficient amount of research to know that there is at least someone out there interested in what you're gonna do,
Totally.
um, but you don't have to go to all the effort of, waiting till it's perfect, both in
Mhm.
time and in money and other resources to then, you know, get feedback that not nearly enough people want it.
Totally. Well, and I think to that point too, that could be the intention of launching something and not waiting till it's perfect, was to collect data and
Yeah.
support the piece that I know you've done a lot and I have done so many times is just the pivot of an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. Like if if you are unable to do that, it is really hard to be a business person slash entrepreneur.
Yes.
Maybe specifically an entrepreneur because and especially now, like nowadays, because things are shifting so much.
And so constantly.
So constantly.
Yeah. So right,
Mhm.
if you can't go back to, like, "This is something that makes me feel good, this is something I'm proud of," then, uh, your foundation's gonna be rocked, and that pivot's gonna be even harder.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, I found this article, it's called "The Perfectionism Paradox in Entrepreneurship," and I'll link it in the show notes, but, um, something it just talks a lot about how entrepreneurs tend to have this quality in common. It is, common among people who have high standards and are very detail oriented and are very driven. Also comes with a lot of negative implications like burnout and unrealistic expectations of, yourself and the others around you. Like what comes first? The perfectionist or the entrepreneur or you know?
Totally. You know, when you asked me to do this episode, I don't know, I thought it was funny just because I think my relationship to perfectionism has so shifted throughout
Yeah.
my time. And I think when I decided to open my business, I guess about 10 years ago, that was in the place that I was able to kind of let go of some of that more than ever.
Was
Just
that
stepping
intentional or did
I
you have
don't
to
know if
like
it was
work at it? Or that's the same
um
thing. Is it both intentional and did you do it on purpose?
I think it was both. I don't think it was conscious, totally. I
There you
think it
go.
was more if I'm gonna do this, whose standards of perfection am I aligning my business with? And
Yeah.
so in preparing for this interview, I did a little bit of research because in just my I love theory, I love data, I love research. So when I
Mhm.
do a lot of presenting, I like to know the origin of
Yeah.
words and the origin of ideas. And so I'm just looking at my notes for a second. But so the origin or like the first documented time of the word perfectionism was 1835. And it was defined as achieving human perfection, particularly with Catholic, Methodist, or Quaker communities. And then in 1934, it kind of shifted to just meaning like highest standard of performance or quality.
Mhm.
And so that just, I think, it really just frames how I view perfectionism and
Mhm.
how I view my business and this question of like what comes first, perfectionism or entrepreneur. And I thought I had an answer 2 seconds ago. But
You can yeah.
I think that perfectionism maybe, and I think that it's this like socially constructed idea of perfect. And then I think personally I had to define I think I was raised with a lot of ideas of what perfect meant and what perfect enabled me to do, which then also made it impossible to do a lot of things, if that
Right.
makes sense.
It makes total sense because
Yeah.
I guess if I can just add to that, I would say that people who have a tendency towards perfectionism also let that assign value to
Mhm.
who they are and what they do. And if it doesn't
Yeah.
meet this certain completely unrealistic standard, then one's value is lower or less than.
Mhm.
Um, and like, right, by according to who?
According to who? And so I
Yeah.
think I come back to that a lot as a business owner of and that was part of why I left working community mental health and why I left working for other organizations because everyone was just caught up in this like a toxic workplace mentality of
Mm.
striving for something that we're never going to make. We're never going to
Mhm.
meet. Just this this idea of perfect is designed to keep us striving for this thing that maybe we're never going to get to. And so for me, then it was deciding like what is my own why
Mhm.
and who are the people that I want to be accountable to and like
Mhm.
what is my standard of business.
Yeah.
Um, and if I can keep coming back to what am I doing and why versus trying to meet a standard that I don't necessarily ever thought, don't ever think I was aligned with anyway.
Yeah.
That makes
I think
sense.
it does make sense. I think, like, as we're talking, it occurs to me just how black and white the the sort of states of mind can be. I mean, I if I'm designing, like, a Canva post or something, I mean, I will all of a sudden, an hour has passed, and I'm like, "Oh, that one horizontal line is not it's still not exactly where," and it's like, "What? No one's gonna notice." But I don't even think that's a conscious thing. I think this is again, this is just how I'm wired. So, it shouldn't be black and white because, again, that lends itself to being completely unrealistic and unreasonable. Like, how would you give advice to people about where to find some gray and find some comfort in being in the gray?
Yeah. Well, I'd probably recommend some therapy.
Mm, what if I told you that this was not an issue for me?
No, I
I'm a
know that's not an issue
huge
for you,
proponent.
but no, I only say that because we're as you said, like we're talking about how the brain is wired. We're talking about years and years and generations of social conditioning of like what is perfect and that we must achieve that because what? Like there's an underlying fear there if we don't
Mhm,
meet perfect. And so holding this idea of like one, if we don't meet perfect, something is going to happen or there's an underlying fear there.
mhm,
And two, that that is also the thing that could be holding you back from whatever you're trying to strive for. So I say therapy only because the wiring of the brain is intense and takes a lot of time and practice. And so part of therapy, but also if you don't want to go to therapy, I would say another tool would be more like positive self-talk to
mm,
yourself and the constant reminding of yourself. Like you're saying, like nobody's going to see this line. And
mhm.
if they do see this line, what's going to happen? And that is another tool that I do recommend for folks, which is if you get caught in that spiral of kind of following it all the way down.
Mm,
Like what is the worst that's going to happen? And then we're like kind of telling yourself, if the worst is going to happen, will you be okay?
yeah, I love that. It's so
And sometimes it's a no, which I want to
right,
be like real for any of the listeners,
totally,
which is
yeah,
I get that.
yeah.
hmm
But at
But
least you have done your due diligence of seeing it through, and then you can decide whether it's worth, you know,
mhm.
putting it out there or not. My husband, we have this sort of running joke about, when I can sense that he's kind of getting in his head about something, um, I we talk about how he's taking a trip to worst case scenarioville,
Mhm.
and but there's actually, like, something sort of, like, tactical and helpful about that because, I'll ask him, like, "Okay, so what might actually happen? Like, if X, Y, and Z is the outcome, what does that even look like?" And it's kind of helpful to play that out.
Mhm. Totally. And as you're saying that too, I think just from I mean, you brought me on as a therapist, so
I did.
I'll play therapist.
Okay,
I think
good.
the other thing that you're pointing out too is that perfectionism is not a feeling. And
Mm.
so, like, this idea of, like, if, like, perfectionism's happening or that's I well, I think 2 things are coming up. Sorry, my brain's
That's okay.
excited
No,
about
this is
this, and
great.
but, like, if I think one of the things for folks to practice is this idea of, like, telling yourself, like, you're not necessarily a perfectionist, but separating that of, like, you're having tendencies of or, like, things that are related to your perfectionism are showing up, but because
Mm.
over identifying with that can also be not supportive. So that's one piece of
Yeah.
that.
No, I love that. Mhm.
And then the other piece that I'm saying, like, perfectionism is not a feeling, which I like that. I don't know if anyone's it sounds good. It sounds great.
It's
But
but that's really helpful, and I am not a therapist, so please jump in and correct me if this doesn't sound
yeah,
right, but, like, if I were to try to describe it about myself, it's like, my feeling is I'm anxious that someone is going to, give me negative feedback if this thing is not perfect.
totally. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing that in therapy or with your friends or with yourself, like, that's the thing to tend to or pay
Mhm.
attention to, because if we, like, go at perfectionism, it's not gonna go very far.
Hmm.
And it also probably won't be very sustainable or long lasting
Yeah.
because so I think for folks that are listening to this, it would be that if you're feeling like perfectionism's coming up or is part of what's going on, like, what is the feeling? Like, what is the
Mhm.
emotional feeling, and what can you do about that?
Yes. Yes. So, to have some, like, tactical tips for Amy or someone like her who says, "Okay, I want to get to a place where I'm just ready to put this new service out there, put this new product out there, and give it a try." Like, maybe what are 3 things they can do or say to themselves, just like a roadmap to sort of, you know, pressing what do you press? Launch? Go? Pressing
Launch, go.
good do to
Yeah,
doing the
well,
thing.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's making me think of this other project that I'm working on that I have not launched yet, but we'll talk about it here.
Okay.
Um, it's this term that I call sustainable urgency.
I feel like we talked about that.
I'm sure we have because
Yeah.
I've been talking about it for 10 years. So,
Oh my god, just launch it already.
well, it has in its forms of groups, but
Yes.
um, basically, it's this idea of like, how do we exist in these current times? And these current times are continuously changing and chaotic and full of crisis, personal and globally. But how do we like find a pace in which we can sustain whatever we're doing while everything feels urgent?
Mm.
I'm using the words to define the thing, but I think maybe you understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
And so, just from that, some of the tips that I think would apply here for somebody who's like, how do I launch this thing? How do I just do the next step? Um, the first step of that applies here too, which is to stop actually, like to just pause and take a breath and get grounded because just from a neuroscience perspective, if we're making decisions and we feel super anxious or not
Mhm.
grounded, we're in the amygdala part of our brain, which is not helpful for decision making.
Yeah.
And so I really do encourage folks to get grounded, take a breath, and do the exact opposite, which is slow down.
Mm.
Um, because I also think in business, my own experience is that most of my mistakes happened when I was moving too quickly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whatever that means. So that would
Okay.
be my first
Yeah.
step.
It's great.
Um, the second would be this reminder, and this is something I think about a lot, which is this idea for me, I don't know, will you tell me how this feels? But a lot of the times it's about process, not product. So
Yes. I'm
yeah.
like, emphatically yes for
Yes.
myself, for
Why?
my daughter, for because, sorry to go, like, slightly off on a tangent, but I have observed about my daughter that, like, from a very early age, she would sense that she wasn't going to be good or perfect at something and just shut down.
Mhm.
And I was like, "What?" Like, but kind of like, who cares? Like, she's just learning to read or learning her ABC or whatever it is. And then it's like I had this aha moment of, right, she has these perfectionist tendencies, and she just, like, senses she's going to feel this intense shame if the end result is not perfect and progress be damned. So, we're really
Mhm.
trying to, you know, notice her progress along the way and comment on it and make that
Mhm.
the thing. So, it's
Mhm.
just it's wild that can apply it to a four-year-old, and it's like
Totally. Well, it
but
starts that early, right?
yeah,
So that's
yes.
it's that conditioning, yeah. Another thing, I found this sticker maybe earlier this week, and I kept losing it, but I like found it, and I was thinking I need to hold on to this for this podcast, and I kept losing it, and then I found it. But it says imperfect progress,
Mm,
and just this idea that, yeah, like how do you reframe or reclaim that just do like moving forward is still
yeah.
progress, but that
Yes.
wouldn't be my 3rd one. I'm just adding
Okay.
that on to what you're
Okay.
saying.
To a very lengthy number 2 that I've made even longer.
Um, and I think the 3rd one, I think this feels different, but just coming back to your why and
Mhm.
defining for yourself what is perfect
Yeah.
or what is a different word. I would even encourage folks to come up with a different word,
Mhm.
for themselves. And when you're thinking about launching your product, like, how is this aligned with your bigger business goals? Why are you doing it? Why do you believe in it? Because that can just oftentimes help if you get negative feedback.
Yeah. Yes.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So switching gears a little bit to you, what and you mentioned a little bit earlier, but that you were sort of able to, whether intentionally or not, kind of release some of that pressure for perfectionism early in your career, but how else has it shown up for you in life and or work?
Releasing it or perfectionism? Which one?
Yes. Yes. Tell us
Both.
about it and then tell us how you fixed yourself.
Oh, I don't think I fixed myself. I mean, I think parenting's been a huge
Yeah.
teacher in that
Yeah.
because there's not enough time to do the level of deliberation I would like to do about anything as a
Mhm.
parent and business owner.
Yeah.
So, I would say, I don't know if that's a is that a tip?
Sure.
Have a child. This you
I didn't
want to
know.
work on
Yeah.
perfection.
Have a
Some
child,
of
it
all.
fixes everything.
No, it definitely doesn't fix everything, but it definitely clarifies a lot and,
Yes.
changes your perception of time, and I think
Mhm.
that true for me, some has been quite helpful because if I had endless amount of time to think about something or launch something, then it would
He'd
never
never be out
happen.
of diapers.
Right. Well, it's true.
Right. I mean, like, then you're talking about another being who you have little to no control over. So you have to relinquish some of that control or ideal because they're a person. So I think that's actually a great example.
Well, I think also to that point, like, what I wanna model for him, like,
Mhm.
I don't want and, there's not I'm not in control of everything or anything really, but, um, not, like, looking at certain things through his eyes
Yeah.
supports how I, like, look look and do things, look at
Yeah.
things and do things. Um,
Absolutely.
I think otherwise, probably just some maybe, like, the positive feedback on certain things that I've done that have gone well, um,
Mhm.
and just thinking about those things as a support for trying new things or letting go of certain things. Um, I would also say asking for help and getting support,
Mhm.
um, would be a huge one, and I think that, starts with this idea of acknowledging that you need support or you're willing to let go of some control. But when you're talking about the Canva thing, I'm never going to make a Canva ever again in my life if I don't have to. So
Right.
for me, from a business perspective, there are certain things that I have decided are not worth my time and
Mhm.
energy, and it is worth me delegating and or paying somebody else to do. And
Yeah.
I know that like does come from a place of privilege if you don't have the money or you're starting a business, but like how else can you interpret that of if there's something that's happening and it's taking way too much time and energy and also triggering those pieces of you of perfectionism, how else can you get help around that?
Right. Well, at the
I'm
very
asking you, I'm
least
just like
yes, well,
generally.
here well, you hire a coach, and, I happen to know
Right.
no, what I was gonna say to that is, like, at the very least, being able to recognize and know the areas that are those triggers, and then
Yeah.
when you're in a place where you have, the resources that you can delegate or outsource, but I also think that just because you are spending money maybe in the early stages of your business and you think, "I don't have this money to spend," you really have to also sort of, like, reverse engineer and say, "But what is this worth? And what will it be worth? I'm getting time back, I'm taking care of my mental health, I'm releasing control of this thing that I don't like." So and that's worth a lot.
Yeah, totally. And especially if it's something you're spending a lot of time and energy on that, yeah, as you said, is just taking away from something else. Yeah, I would say like some of my, yeah, like my marketing and media and sometimes my newsletters, like I have people helping me
Mhm.
do those things because similarly to what Amy's saying, like, I might sit on those things
Mm.
forever because either they're not ready or this piece isn't done, and so I really feel that asking for help and it doesn't necessarily have to cost money either.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
And
Asking for help.
I think asking for help and,
Yeah.
and being okay with admitting that you need help somewhere is huge. And not a, admission of, uh, imperfection or inability to do something. As I always tell my clients, like, yes, you can learn to do your social media or your finance, whatever it is, the thing that you
Right.
don't like or gives you anxiety. But should you? Like, is it worth it? Or can someone else do it better and faster and
Mhm.
with more proficiency and all of that?
Right. And will you enjoy it? Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
maybe one other thing that's come up as we've been talking is, you know, I I launched this podcast and people are like, "Oh, so like how often are you going to do episodes just like sort of like on demand or as you come up with them?" And I was like, "No, I'm doing them weekly." And I, like, got into the real work of it, and I was like,
It's a lot,
"Oh,
right?
this is a lot."
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
However, like, I put this sort of time expectation on myself, whether I meant it to be that over whatever, but it's forcing me to make it happen and forcing me to, like, did I hear, a hiccup on one of my recordings yesterday? Like, yeah. Okay. It would take
Totally.
way more
Well,
time to, publish a replacement episode or whatever. So, um,
yeah.
sometimes just like setting a schedule that's non-negotiable, I think could be a good way to push past the perfectionism.
Totally. Well, and I think that I'm hearing like discipline. I don't think that is a bad thing. Like discipline and
Yeah.
structure, but also
Mhm.
figuring out like what is that for
Yeah.
you, every individual, because I think, there's tons of people who have written books on what works for them. It doesn't mean, I think that's this idea of like really figuring out what's going to work for you and not trying to make something else fit. But yeah, I think the structure. And
Yeah.
also, I'm just thinking about that. Yeah, when you launch your podcast and like hear like one hiccup in a recording, I mean, nobody is hearing that.
Right.
And I think the reverse of that is like, what if that was the thing that stopped you from doing it ever again or ever? And
Yeah.
thinking like what that takes away. Like you don't reach people, you don't further your business, you don't get all the positive things that you get out of it. And so I think that is another thing to think about of like, what do you lose
Yeah.
by
What are you giving up? The
letting
opportunity
perfectionism
cost.
taking
Yes.
over? Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I had to I have sometimes I have to pull out my MBA words, and that was one
Good.
of them. Yeah. All right. So we start each episode with our Hey Coach segment. And every episode where I have a guest, we end with this question. So on the podcast, we talk a lot about how entrepreneurship is basically a workout. What is one business strength or habit that you wish you had developed earlier in your career?
I think that I I wish I had better systems for bookkeeping and just budgeting and also time off. Those are
Mm,
linked for me. Um, and yeah, I think there's a lot of confidence to be built in doing bookkeeping and your finances, especially as an entrepreneur and a woman and a
yeah,
parent. So,
yeah,
yeah, that.
yeah. That's a great one.
Mhm.
I have yet to
Yeah,
hear one that I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no, I'm, like, totally solid there." Like, no, we all need work in
totally.
all the areas. No, I think and I appreciate your honesty about that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, well, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and, people can find you at samfieldtherapy.com or on Instagram at Field Therapy, and those links will also be in the show notes as well as the article we discussed. But is there anything that you've got coming up that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, you'll see on my website, I have a few groups, online and in person coming this fall and winter, so you can check that out. I have a journaling group that happens on Wednesdays. It's a virtual group, and, then I also will be running sometime in October my second group at my friend's horse farm. So she has 35 horses and a new baby, and like 15 baby goats,
Oh,
and we do a group that is designed for caretakers, caregivers, and people that identify as people pleasers. So we get to hang out with animals, and it's not a therapy group, but just more therapeutic. And then you also get served some food. So
ooh,
yeah, it's really good.
yeah, sounds great. And you are in Denver for people wondering about stuff that's,
Mhm.
in person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, thanks, Sam.
Yeah. Thank you.
And if you, the listener, enjoyed today's episode, subscribe, leave a review, and submit your Hey Coach questions to me at Leslie at thefitnessofbusiness.com. Let me spot you through your toughest business sets. See you next time.